The Coach Curl podcast is brought to you by Think and Grow Business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to today's Leader, the Coach Curl podcast. We're looking at episode 185 today. A crisis separates the pretenders from the player.
Way to go, guys. Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul. I see you. Finish on. Coach Curl.
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to episode 185 of today's Leader, the Coach Curl podcast. A crisis separates the pretenders from the players, and it's an incredibly... we know we are in incredible times. We are in isolation, we are in lockdown in many countries of the world. We're looking now at some countries starting to reopen the economy and starting to release the constraints that have been placed on the population. And it's been an incredible journey, I guess, from as the human population since about early March. And we're now in the first couple of weeks of May. So for the last 2 months, we have been on a journey where we've been in crisis. There's been a health crisis. And from that health crisis, we have seen the economic and the business crisis that will potentially unfold. Now, we know that the health professionals are very wary of a second wave from the health impacts. But can I tell you, we've seen a massive impact on our economy and we've seen a massive impact on our businesses. And from that, I will guarantee that we will see a second wave of economic impact for businesses. And so many people ask, what do I mean by that? Well, I think that when people return to work, yes, there will be an initial stage where people are grateful. But as I mentioned in last week's episode, there's going to be an increasing level of disenchantment, especially where businesses haven't grown and the people around those businesses haven't grown. But that was episode 184. Go check it out because that is definitely a second wave that's going to be coming. But during the crisis, I've been working with a number of leaders to help them navigate their way through this crisis. And there's a number of factors that I've seen with these leaders and from observation of other leaders during this time. Now, a number of the problems that have been discussed with me are things like having a disagreement with a course of action or a direction that's been set from a leader that's further up the chain. That's been a common place. That's been a common scenario where I've had to navigate and work with leaders to work through that. Because, at the end of the day, you may not necessarily agree with the decision that's been made from further up the chain, but the reality is it's good that a decision's been made because then at least we can manage that particular decision. Another common concern is getting other leaders to step up. And, that's usually leaders that report back to a leader. There's been concerns around a lack of accountability as leaders themselves have focused in on their own fears and their anxiety. And, of course, one of the constant problems during this time is how do I stay connected with remote teams? Now, some of the more courageous leaders that I've coached have dived into their own self-leadership. But many were more concerned with others. Now, truth of leadership is that we put our people first. That is a truth. That is a number one truth of leadership. We put our people first. It should be a leader's focus, having a strong focus on their people. But during a crisis like this, that gets challenged. Because it's very hard for many to divorce themselves from the feelings that they're having, that they're feeling, the anxiety, the fears, the stress that they're going through, and to be able to provide that calming ship for their teams. So many were challenged and have been challenged around that. Now, my role as a coach is to help and support leaders, ask them the relevant questions, to bring awareness and to help them see better ways. And of course, some are looking for others to step up. You know, unfortunately, it's a human nature. I'm not quite sure. I'm uncertain, so I'm hoping someone else takes the lead. Others are looking for people to share the load of leadership, while others are looking for collaboration, and even more, some are looking to build strength within their leadership. And all of those things I've spoken to over the last couple of podcast episodes. You know, what do you want to remember the COVID-19 crisis for? Was that a time that you really looked at some of those, the way that you stepped into leadership and the way you led through that crisis? What about some of those tough conversations that you've had to have during this particular crisis? There's skill sets that we've built during this crisis that as a leader you should never lose. So part of our role coming through this crisis is to be able to have that genuine reflection back on some of that stuff that we've experienced and never lose it. So others have been frustrated in judgment, and judgment is always based on our own perspective, our own perceptions, the way we see the world. So when we're judging others, it's judging others from our lens, from the way that we see the world. And judgment brings its own set of demons for leaders. It tends to poison leaders. It poisons connections. It poisons performance, and it poisons culture. And why, you may ask? So conscious leaders, and I'm really focused around the concept of conscious leadership. Conscious leaders focus on self-leadership. The self-leadership of being the role model that their teams need. And when they do that, they can lead, they understand, acknowledge and appreciate their responsibility as a leader. And as a result, they become better leaders for it. So they understand, they acknowledge, and they appreciate their responsibility as a leader. And they become better leaders because of that. It's often said that leaders are revealed in a crisis, and that does ring true, but more often than not, a leader is exposed in a crisis. Leaders are revealed in a crisis, yes, but more often than not, a leader is exposed from a crisis. And that's why a crisis will separate the pretenders from the players, because the player shows up while the pretenders get shown up. Okay? It separates the pretenders from the players, because the player will show up while the pretenders are shown up. So if you're looking to show up, here's a tip of which I have used, and anyone that's worked in the organizations that I have will know this tip, this one little crystal clear tip that we all shared. And can I tell you, this is a tip for everyday leadership. It's a tip for everyday leadership, not just when you're in a crisis. And always remind yourself, this is the tip, leaders are on show every day. Leaders are on show every day. Now just take that in for a second. Leaders are on show every day. So what does that mean for you? For me, when I was leading teams, when I was in corporate retail business, for me, that statement helped me choose my attitude every day. It helped me reset daily as I took on the role. Because as a leader, if I wanted to see the right behaviors in my stores, I had to model them. I had to be the role model. I had to be the example. If I wanted performance, I had to model that. If I wanted structure, I had to lead that and embrace it. And if I wanted culture, I had to live and breathe it. I had to be the role model because I was on show every day. If I walked past something that was unacceptable once, twice, no matter how many times, I was never going to get that standard. Never. So leaders are on show every day. If I walked into my store in a foul mood, I knew that within 20 minutes I would have a team that were fearful of coming into contact with me. And then the corresponding impact that that had on customer service was just really poor leadership. I had to be the role model because leaders are on show every day. And it's a really good philosophy to take on your leadership journey going forward. It's vitally important today, but it's vitally important every day to remember that. Tell yourself, leaders are on show every day. Leaders are on show every day. As a leader, it all comes from you. The faults and the failings that you are seeing in others. And this is a real story around judgment, right? So the faults and the failings you are seeing in others are first found in the mirror. Oh, take that on. The faults and the failings that you are seeing in others are first found in the mirror. In a crisis, everything is exaggerated. And the behaviours that you are now seeing that may be a concern to you have always been there. Just not as evident. Not as evident. Not as visual. Maybe even hidden. But crisis exaggerates things. And these behaviours get exposed in a crisis. And they're amplified. As a leader, it all comes from you. The faults and failings that you are seeing in others are first found in the mirror. And then the crisis exaggerates these behaviours. Self-management is so important as a leader. Having the discipline to be a conscious leader and investing in the intention of being the best leader is vital and critical for your success. If you are concerned about what you are seeing in others, look inwards first. Reflect and ask, are you being the role model that your team needs? If you're seeing behaviours, actions, or lack of accountability or lack of performance within your team, ask yourself, are you being the role model that you need to be? Are you being the role model that your team needs? A crisis separates the pretenders from the players. Choose to be a player. Lead the way. Be the role model. Acknowledge that you're on show. Doing anything less amplifies the pretender that all of us have in us. Now, to end on a positive and maybe a little bit less intensive note, the reality is that crisis changes each and every one of us. It changes. We are all changed by a crisis. Now, the concept of normal has changed, right? So if you go back or you think that you are going back to normal and you haven't taken the time to adjust, grow, amend, enhance yourself, the reality is that the old normal is no longer applicable and that you will be left behind, because the change that we see in a crisis can and should be positive. There are things that have happened in a crisis that are positive things. There's also choices that we make here. So we can choose the positive and we can choose to be negative. That comes down to a choice. And coming through this crisis and coming into recovery, that choice will become self-evident. Many leaders I speak to are seeing the positive. Working from home has seen so many flow-on effects, and this is one of the really interesting pieces around the COVID-19 crisis. Prior to the crisis, working from home was seen with in many organizations as something not to be trusted. Something not to be trusted. That people would slack off, that people wouldn't get their job done, that people wouldn't be able to be checked in on to see that they're doing the job. But what we've actually seen, and what a lot of leaders have acknowledged, is the productivity and efficiency gains that have happened from working at home. We've seen people make the conscious effort to connect in with their team, whether it's through a Zoom call or whether it's through other video protocols. They're checking in more often with their team just to see how they are. We've seen reductions of petty politics. We've seen reductions of people walking on eggshells. We've seen more communication. And funny enough, that has all led to this thing called efficiency and productivity gains from working from home, which was always fraught with this whole lack of trust and integrity. Now, a good leader will be looking at some of those positives and asking themselves, when we do return to the office, how do I maintain that? How do I hold on to that? How do I embrace the concept that people can work from home when this crisis ceases to exist? So I ask yourself, what positives have you seen and how can you embrace them? And I'm going to leave you that as I close. So what are you going to embrace from the crisis that we found ourselves in? What are those positives? And what can you take out of it to make yourself a better leader every day? Hey, thanks for tuning in to episode 185 of today's Leader the Coach Curl podcast. As always, it's been brought to you by Think and Grow Business and the Coach Curl Academy, where we are strengthening leadership, we're building mindset, and we're growing business. And we're doing that through the concept of personal, professional, and business growth. Check it out at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au and thecoachcurlacademy.com. A huge shout out to all the people that have subscribed and left reviews. We really do appreciate that. The more 5-star reviews we get, the more easily we are found. And this message may be a message that someone needs to hear. So please, if you've resonated with today's episode of the podcast, please leave a review, share, subscribe, do all of that, because it really does help us become meaningful in the world. Just remember, where you are stronger, you are braver, you are wiser. And as per always, don't ever forget the golden rule. Yes, you know what it is. Just don't be an arsehole. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.